with them. We also are setting up a new subcommittee that will be reviewing police training. And we may have some suggestions for additional or different training in that area. I thought it was interesting today in the Ann Arbor News, we see that the Ann Arbor Police Department is coming up with an AI procedure to review police body-worn cameras. And so we didn't know about that until it came up in the Ann Arbor News today. And so we're looking forward to getting with Interim Chief Metzger and seeing how this new AI, I think as I understand it, it's called Trulio, and we're interested in how that's going to affect our oversight function. So we'll be getting into that. Finally, I do want to announce, I've spoken a couple of times about our public forum that's scheduled for September, and we will have discussions about the traffic stop report as well as the driving equality ordinance. And we are inviting the public. We don't know what the response will be, but as you know, of all the city commissions, we are the only commission with the word community in our name. And so we're inviting the community out. We hope to have members of council, members of the police department, and others to come out. That forum is going to be September 27th. Now, our normal meeting is on the last Tuesday of the month, but because of where we wanted to have this meeting in the community, we are moving it from the Tuesday to the last Wednesday, which will be the 27th of September, Wednesday the 27th, and that will be at the Peace Neighborhood facility on Maple Road. So again, we are inviting the public. We'll be sending out emails to various community organizations, and we certainly invite council and the public to come. We're also looking forward to meeting the police chief finalists in that study. So that is pretty much where we are. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to council this evening. If you have any questions, I'm happy to respond. Otherwise, thank you for your time and good evening.
Thank you, Chair Carter. We now come to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the community to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment, one must have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers will have 3 minutes to address council, and only one person may speak at a time. For those participating on Zoom, the city clerk will notify you when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and yield the floor. Council rules also allow for 45 minutes of public comment reserved time at the beginning of the meeting. We allow for 15 speakers in the initial 45-minute time period. If at the conclusion of 45 minutes, speakers remain on the public comment list, we'll reopen public comment for those speakers at the end of the meeting. Our first speaker tonight is Brandon Dimcheff.
Brandon Dimcheff, go ahead.
Hi. Hello, City Council. My name is Brandon Dimcheff. I'm from West Larrytown in the 4th Ward, less than half a mile from the proposed rezoning for C1. And I'm calling in today to support C1 and say how excited I am to see a mass timber project proposed in Ann Arbor. And so I hope you approve this first reading of C1 tonight. C1AR zoning seems entirely appropriate for this area. It's right across the street from the athletic campus, near a bunch of other student housing and stuff. And the plan here will provide much needed housing while being way less carbon intensive than most of our other structures in the city. The site plan also provides a free public plaza that's about the size of the Library Lane surface parking lot, and it provides it at no expense to the city. So please support C1. Also, while I can't speak to the details of C3, I'm generally supportive of regulations that allow people to make informed decisions I happened to luck out by purchasing a relatively well-insulated house that isn't incredibly expensive and wasteful to heat and cool, but much of our housing stock is older and poorly insulated. A purchaser may not know they're in for thousands of dollars of insulation work or thousands of dollars of extra energy bills. It seems perfectly reasonable to require disclosures around energy consumption during a real estate transaction, so that new home buyers know what to expect, and also to encourage sellers to make energy efficiency improvements prior to sale. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Next up, we have Edward Vielmetti.
Hello, my name is Edward Vielmetti. I live in Lower Burns Park. Lower Burns Park, close to Stadium Boulevard, the east part of Stadium Boulevard, but that's a handy commute to the west part of Stadium Boulevard, which is part of the proposed TC zoning, TC1 zoning. And I want to speak to TC1 in opposition to two of the changes that have been proposed to making it easier for car dealerships and car rental agencies to set up shop. Car dealerships and car rental agencies are densely car-centered businesses. They're businesses that exist because of the car, in order to get you to drive a car, and are completely car-brained. A typical additional new car on the road will rack up thousands, if not tens of thousands of miles. Having any kind of improvement to the ability for businesses in the city to sell and rent cars is at odds with our stated goals. It's at odds with our goals to reduce vehicle miles traveled, because what can you do with a car? You can travel some vehicle miles. It's at odds with our complete streets, because these businesses are very car-dense uses. And it's at odds with pedestrian bicycle safety, because the sorts of roads that you get when you have lots of car dealerships are roads effectively known as stroads or street roads. And some people have wittily referred to them as car sewers, because they're wide and they're deep and they're nearly impossible to cross on foot or on bicycle. They're dangerous, and things that we can do to reduce the vehicle intensity of our city are all good. So I'm opposed to the proposed changes to TC1 that would allow car dealerships and car rental agencies as even special exception uses. I don't see any particular reason we should yield an inch to those. I know that the members of council have said nice things about the car repair facilities in their area. I can also say nice things about the fellows who fix our cars, but the dealerships and rental agencies, I don't see any particular reason to yield an inch to those interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kathy Griswold.
First off, I'd like to thank everyone for serving here. I will be talking tonight about two items on the consent agenda that total to about $1 million that are basically for the public right-of-way, sort of for pedestrian safety. But what I want to say is that there's a complete lack of any feedback or focus on operations within the pedestrian safety area. And as a council member, I was frequently accused of being negative to staff or negative to my council members. I've given this a lot of thought. The problem is that we have a local political machine that is focused on more shiny new things. Staff realizes that they will be roadkill if they don't go along with this amorphous political machine in our community. That said, the city is liable, so the political machine can go over there and do whatever they want, but the city is liable if we have dangerous situations in our community that are not being addressed by the city. Situations that have been identified in writing time after time, and one includes a letter where the city committed to taking actions back in 1998 to keep the vegetation cleared from the right-of-way in the King School neighborhood. That is not being done. It is extremely dangerous, and now we will have many vehicles cutting through there because they cannot go southbound on Earhart, and they will be using these neighborhood roads to drop their kids off, especially at St. Paul School. We also have issues of signage, what I call the backwards crosswalk signs that are backwards. They're still backwards. Opened a ticket, the ticket was closed, staff talked about it, it wasn't done. The hide-and-seek crosswalks, where we have vegetation 6 feet tall at school crosswalks. The peekaboo signage, where we have signage that is behind, well, today someone put in a ticket, it's behind a detour sign. It's behind vegetation. It's behind whatever. No one on staff goes back and looks at that. It's time that we needed to. And in closing, I just want to say that I and others are working with the state of Michigan on improvements to the UD10 crash report so we can make data-driven decisions, and also in improving the Michigan Vehicle Code. And also thank you to President Ono for his work on workforce housing. Those plans are moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tom Rinkert.
Good evening. My name is Tom Renkert. I'm the CEO for the Ann Arbor Area Board of Realtors. We represent 1,100 real estate professionals in the Ann Arbor area. On behalf of our membership, I'm here today to speak in opposition to the Home Energy Rating Disclosure Ordinance. Although we applaud the city's efforts, this ordinance does little to help the city to achieve the 820 goals. It targets a small group of owners selling their homes, which is given by the owner to the buyer, who typically does not have the financial resources to act on the recommendations that are presented through the ordinance. We have worked openly with the city staff and the Energy Commission to thoroughly understand the proposed ordinance and are aware of the city's plans to hire one home energy assessor. Even though the ordinance does not include the cost of the assessment for the city to bear this expense. Keeping in mind that the city staff has also pointed out that they have met with additional firms to help with assessments, staff is clearly aware that one assessor will not be able to meet the demands in a timely fashion, potentially stalling home sales and/or adding additional cost to the transaction. If you would please, consider our rental housing inspection process as a framework for energy assessment. With as many as 5 inspectors on staff, it can take several weeks and sometimes several months to have a rental property inspected. Most importantly, and as pointed out in our August 3rd letter to City Council, sellers will not be able to meet the advertisement requirements of the ordinance. Additionally, it's clear from the 30-month report to the Portland City Council that most buyers are not in a financial position to make this kind of improvement needed to increase their score significantly. If by chance they are, realtors locally point out that buyers will prioritize the need to improve their home, such as making updates to kitchens or baths over adding installation to their homes. Either way, after making one of the largest investments of their lifetime, the facts from the Portland study show that new buyers simply do not choose to make energy-based improvements to their homes. Lastly, let's keep in mind that this is a very basic checklist. It's not a blow-door test. It estimates the cost to heat, cool, and light the property. Rather than an estimate, please remember that buyers can contact DTE and obtain an actual cost for recent years. Honorable Council members, we respectfully ask that you empower city staff to design an incentive-based energy assessment program, a model that others will follow, a program that will empower all Ann Arbor homeowners to actively participate in achieving the 820 goals, rather than a forced program for sellers who will only face punishment after leaving our great city. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Next up, we have Monica Swartout-Bebo.
Good evening, City Council members and staff. My name is Monica Swartout-Bebo, and I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of the Carytown Concert House, located at 415 North 4th Avenue in the Carytown District. Also present is our board president, Ann Arbor resident and Realtor Stephanie Hale. I'm here to encourage you to vote yes in support of Carytown Concert House's club liquor license application with the City of Ann Arbor. Carytown Concert House is proud to be entering its 39th year as a nonprofit arts venue, a cultural gem in our community that offers a unique opportunity to enjoy exceptional artists in an intimate, historical setting that is unlike any other concert experience in Ann Arbor. This coming 23-24 season, we have plans to present 90 concerts with a culturally diverse and eclectic combination of local, national, and international world-class artists. As the Artistic and Executive Director, I believe this club license is instrumental to the future growth of the organization and would greatly enhance our ability to serve the community and attract folks to the Carytown Farmers Market and Carytown area. For the past few decades, KCH has routinely applied for and used all 12 allowable special licenses from the state each year for special events. KCH Founders, a club of supporters who give $300 or more annually, have expressed a desire to have more than 12 opportunities to enjoy wine or beer at KCH in a given year. After decades of going through the arduous process of obtaining these special licenses, the KCH Board of Trustees now supports a club liquor license for the organization, as it would allow us to more easily build community among its Founders Club by routinely offering concert afterglows and other events especially for them, such as artist meet and greets, including wine and beer. It will also help us generate additional revenue for KCH through increased concession sales. And it would allow us to thoughtfully target concerts and special events that would lend themselves well to the inclusion of alcohol concessions, such as concerts held on New Year's Eve or Valentine's Day, our dance hall night series, our Wine, Women, and Song concert series, or concerts that occur in conjunction with other area events, such as Kindlefest or Ann Arbor Pride. It would also offer us the opportunity to give a similar scenario as happens at other iconic venues here in Ann Arbor, such as the Arc and the Michigan Theater. On behalf of the KCH staff and Board of Trustees, I want to thank you for your favorable consideration of our application and assure you that we will use the license with appropriate care and responsibility. We look forward to your support and also to seeing you at the house for a concert soon. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Alex Lowe.
Alex Lowe on Zoom, go ahead.
Hi, this is Alex Lowe. I'd like to speak to you on 3 topics tonight. First, CA10, the purchase of a new wood chipper, combined with CA11, the rental of street sweepers. While I'm in favor of both of these and don't believe they should be at all controversial, the fact that as a city we're willing to purchase or rent new fossil fuel powered devices for these purposes, but have spent years delaying the purchase of similar equipment sized for bike lanes, shows a sort of double think with respect to our environmental goals. For bike lanes, we're reducing the effectiveness of these energy saving, emissions reducing bike lanes by demanding a very high bar for the maintenance equipment that we buy, a bar that we simply are not applying to other purchases by the city. If studied, I would reasonably expect that purchasing even a diesel powered street sweeper for the bike lanes that would allow us to make them properly separated and protected would have net negative emissions due to the car trips that would be turned into bike trips. The same cannot be said for either of the items on these orders tonight. If we truly want to meet our HE0 goals, we should be willing to do the potentially unpalatable but still very effective things to help achieve these goals, especially if we're willing and able to do those same unpalatable things for goals unrelated to HE0. Second, I'd like to speak on the TC1 amendment, C2. I'm deeply concerned about the addition of automobile-related uses, even with a special exception as primary uses. There's no indication that that these exceptions will be within the spirit of TC1, and the addition of automobile-related uses as a valid primary use runs a strong risk of entirely defeating the purpose of the TC1 district. Please reconsider this. Finally, I'd like to request that that the city make a bike lane gap dashboard similar to the very useful sidewalk gap dashboard we have. This dashboard should not simply be bike lane or no bike lane, but rather include a level of service
30
for all
seconds.
and abilities. No bike lane is obviously a gap, but painted bicycle gutters or even buffered bike lanes that have a whole 2 strips of paint a car would have to cross to kill a bicyclist are woefully insufficient. We need safe infrastructure, and council should be aware of the current
Time.
atrocious state of our infrastructure. The dashboard's one step to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Thomas Stallberg.
Tom Stolberg, phone number 534. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. This is Tom Stolberg calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor, and I'm calling with regards to C1, which is a rezoning with conditions to the block bounded by State, Stimson, Henry, and White Streets, commonly known as Southtown. The conditional zoning request should be denied for the following reasons. It is the kind of conditional zoning that the courts have very clearly ruled against. And it would create significant possible repercussions to property owners and tenants for many blocks nearby in the area commonly known as Lower Burns Park. And there is a legal remedy. The same exact site plan could be approved in a different manner that would be legal. The way it's applied for is not. I suggest you speak with your city attorney about that for a more formal opinion, but this is very similar to what happened with the Garnet, which was voted down because the conditional zoning there was not legal, but it was later approved with the exact same plan with the PUD. So let me focus on some of the ramifications of doing it this way. Right now, the city has decided that short-term rentals that are not owner-occupied should not be allowed, not permitted, in areas that are residentially zoned. That would include this location, but it would also include everything along State Street, between State and White as you go up north from here, Stadium, Granger, McKinley, Dewey was in there, all the way up to Arch, where north of Arch it's already zoned for something that would permit short-term rentals. So you take all these areas that are not intended for short-term rentals per our law, and if you approve this one with a condition, in this case, they're going to allow short-term rentals, but they're going to cap it to a certain amount. Additional zoning for the next person that applies in one of these places up and down State Street, across from University of Michigan's athletic facilities, you can't say no to the next person because conditional zoning has to be voluntary by the developer, and you can't turn them down for not volunteering what the last one did.
30
so
seconds.
You're backing into a situation where you're going to be forced to approve potentially downtown height buildings or conversion of those houses as is into short-term rental situations, removing from our long-term rental stock in an area that right now it's mostly student rental there, but there's also a lot of families that live there. So whether you're an owner-occupant or a tenant, we risk losing long-term housing stock in favor of short-term rentals by accident. If we did this deliberately as part of the comprehensive plan revisions, so be it. But
Time.
not backing into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Deani Sabin.
Having
Yes, my name is Deani Sabin. I moved to Ann Arbor about a year ago from Evanston, where my partner was a graduate student at Northwestern. It's a very similar kind of college town. And there we rented a one-bedroom apartment, about 550 square feet, for $1,200 a month. We anticipated moving here that we'd be able to find similar rentals because the cost of living comparisons suggest that Ann Arbor is only 1.5 to 2% more expensive than Evanston. We were shocked then to discover that a comparable apartment here is $1,600 a month, which is 33% more expensive than what we were paying. It is particularly egregious because salaries here are about the same as they are in Evanston, so this represents a large percentage of our income. I rent from McKinley Properties at Traver Crossing now, which we have found to be less than desirable. We've had issues with mold, a hot water heater that is constantly in and out of service, as well as struggling to get any kind of maintenance for things as simple as a light switch repair. Public spaces, for example, the laundry room is consistently covered in mold, has standing water, and roof ceiling tiles that disintegrate and are not repaired despite repeated requests for maintenance. We've had 5 property managers since I've been here, which is only a year. So there's been no continuity in management for tenants. And in just a very small example of the lack of respect for tenants, the washing machines changed from being coin-operated to being app-operated recently. The app itself is buggy, and in its privacy policy, it says that not only does it collect all of your data, your demographics, your location, your employment, your name, your birthday, your email, your phone number, it can and will sell it to third parties and other vendors that they can use in their marketing materials. And I don't know about you, but I don't really like it when my washing machine is selling my data. So I tried to use a wash card where you pre-fill it, but the pre-filling card station is located in the property management office, which has been closed all summer because our property manager is managing 4 other properties and has been unable to be on the property at all. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what we pay for, and I'm really hoping that Ann Arbor City Council will continue its work for tenants' rights to make these situations better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Claire Arneson.
If Claire Arneson is on Zoom, can you please raise your hand? Caller ending in the phone number 404, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Claire Arneson. I'm here as a renter, a member of the Graduate Employee Organization Housing Caucus, and a member of the McKinley Tenants Association. My 5 years as a renter at Traver Crossing, a McKinley property in Ward 1, have been defined by the mismanagement of my rental property, including management authorizing entry into my apartment for repair without my permission or notification, urgent maintenance tickets for things like backed up kitchen sinks getting left unassigned by management for days at a time, an exterior building door that was jammed shut for 2 days during the winter such that the only exit from my building was an iced over door not maintained for winter use, and the same exterior door being left unlocked without a handle for weeks, even as I received notifications from the property to beware of package theft and multiple emails to the management office left unanswered. It's logical to ask why I haven't moved to a different property, but last year, after management increased my rent by $125 per month, and then, as I was deciding whether or not to renew my lease, retracted this offer and raised my rent an additional $50 per month, I tried to find a new apartment. I soon learned that McKinley Properties owns 60% of the workforce housing in Washtenaw County, making it nearly impossible to leave a McKinley property. When I did find some alternatives, each property had a wait list for new tenants and a wait list fee, usually around $350. Even though these fees are refundable, a spot on a wait list did not guarantee me a unit, and I would need to make multiple deposits or run the risk of not getting an apartment. I could not afford to place hundreds of dollars in waitlist fees, essentially interest-free loans to landlords, but also could not risk finding myself without an apartment, so I was forced to stay in my McKinley apartment. Again, this spring, when it came time for my renewal, the new lease came along with a $220 per month increase and an increase to late fees and pet fees. This last time I spoke at a city council meeting, it was in support of the right to renew ordinance, which passed last fall. This, along with the early leasing ordinance and creation of the Renters Commission, mark important steps the council has taken toward giving security to tenants and holding landlords accountable. But there is much more that can and needs to be done. First, eliminating both refundable and non-refundable fees that prohibit many renters from finding, moving from, or staying in an apartment. Second, ensuring that existing ordinances and building codes are enforced and proactively addressing tenant issues by working with the Renters Commission to expand renter protections. And finally, endorsing the effort to repeal the statewide rent stabilization preemption and restore local government's power to make laws about equitable rent. To use the words of McKinley CEO Albert Barrett, who spoke on the Claims Detroit podcast last year, we're glad to own 100% of Washtenaw County, if not 60%, not just 60%. If City Council does not take action to protect renters, the city will soon be owned by landlords. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Henry Herskowitz.
Good evening. Sometimes it doesn't take a revisionist to enlighten us about the exaggerations we find in the Holocaust narrative. Often the Enlightenment comes at the hands of the Holocaust traditionalists themselves. Recommended reading from the Ann Arbor Public Schools Holocaust curriculum is the well-known novel Night by the famous Elie Wiesel, page 32. Not far from us, huge flames were rising from a ditch. Something was being burned there. A truck drew close and unloaded its hold. Small children, babies. Yes, I did see this with my own eyes. Children thrown into the flames. Is it any wonder that ever since then, sleep tends to elude me? And in another book by the same author, The Jews of Silence, he writes about the alleged massacre of 33,000 Jews at Babi Yar in the Ukraine. From page 48, we read, eyewitnesses say that for months after the killings, the ground continued to spurt geysers of blood. Without supporting evidence, Wiesel wants us to believe that blood spurted out of the ground in geyser-like fashion for months, when no one has ever seen such an occurrence. But in a third book, Legends of Our Time, Wiesel comes clean. In the introduction, he writes about a conversation with the local rabbi. What are you writing? The rabbi asked. Stories, I said. He wanted to know what kind of stories. True stories. About people you knew? Yes. About people I might have known. About things that happened? Yes. About things that happened or could have happened. But they did not? No, not all of them did. In fact, some were invented from almost the beginning to almost the end. The rabbi leaned forward as if to measure me up and said with more sorrow than anger, that means you are writing lies. I did not answer immediately. The scolded child within me had nothing to say in his defense, yet I had to justify myself. Things are not that simple, Rabbi. Some events do take place but are not true. Others are, although they never occurred. What will the reaction of Ann Arbor students be when they read of such an admission? Thank you.
Next, we have Amo Keku.
Hi, good evening. My name is Amo Kaku, and I have lived in Ann Arbor since 2000. I want to get your attention on rent in the in Ann Arbor. I moved into one of the rental apartment, which was purchased by the McKinley in 2012. I have lived there, the same unit, from 2004 until now, so it's about 19 years. And before that, between 2000 and 2004, I was a graduate student at U of M. And when moved in 2004, the monthly rent was about $900, and it was gradually going up about the same rate as inflation, maybe yearly of maybe $200 to $300 per year between 2004 up until 2021. But in the last 2 years, the rent went up 8%, $1,200 per year. And this to next year, it went up 15% from the previous year, which is about $2,200 per year. And I lived there for a long time with me and my wife and my 2 children, which no longer live with me, but this is like a home. I moved out of Japan and came here. And Annaba is almost like my home. I'm 70 years old. I was 7 years undergraduate and graduate from 77 to 83 at U of M. Then I left and I came back. And my wife is an artist and a teacher, art teacher, and she and I together, we make probably no more than $40,000, dollar gross income before taxes. And so currently our rent, we are about a little bit over $20,000 per year at this current rate, and it's about 60% of our gross income. And it's really tough for us, especially past 2 years, 3 years during the pandemic, where it's difficult for everybody. But because my wife and I are not U.S. citizens, we are LPR, lawful permanent resident, holding green card. So we were not eligible for receive economic COVID-19 assistant, check or anything. So it is really difficult for us to, continue to live, and we like to live in this, possible, this apartment instead of moving out, which will cost like $2,000. So I would like you to consider some kind of rent control. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Jennifer Sparks.
Good evening. So I have been a renter in the Ann Arbor area since I moved here in 2016. And I've spent most of that time in McKinley properties. My partner and I currently live at Evergreen, but for some background, my partner lived with roommates in the Villas, which is over on Gulfside, before I joined them here. And in that apartment with McKinley, the ceiling collapsed twice, once before I moved in and again after, in 2 different rooms. Still have a plush toy that's got some damage. So you can see why my partner got anxious when we discovered a cabinet door in our current kitchen would no longer open all the way because it was scraping against a drooping ceiling. We had to report the ceiling 3 times. At first we reported just that it was drooping, then that there are cracks that had begun to spread. And finally, after almost 2 full months with no response, we submitted a report that let them know the ceiling now sagged several feet across. Along with those reports, I had to call at least twice. In the end, they got a contractor to come out, ignore our instructions to contact us before entering, and get drywall all over our kitchen. They had neglected to put down a tarp or any other potential reasonable protections, so our appliances, countertop, and the floor were coated in debris. And because we weren't informed that they were coming, our cats were exposed to the dust while we were away. And while the work was being done, we had no easy access to our kitchen to prepare food in our home. We didn't know what to do at the time or who to talk to for help, as McKinley had proved unreliable, and that's just one example of sort of what we've dealt with there. So Just providing housing comes with significant responsibilities. It involves management and maintenance. It requires bearing costs of insurance. And I'm sure there's so many other concerns I don't know about yet. But as tenants, we pay McKinley to cover these costs and fulfill these responsibilities. And a lot of us have no choice but to rely on them for housing. Well, they failed to fulfill their duties as a landlord. And I wanted to share this story in particular to ask that the council continue to hold them accountable and continue to work towards tenant protections. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Justin Yuan.
Justin Yuan, caller 807. Press star 6 to unmute your phone. Go ahead.
Hello? Okay. Sorry about that technical issue. Yes, my name is Justin Yuan, and I've been a McKinley property tenant for 3 years. I am calling in on the issue of non-refundable fees in tenant applications. Even as they raise their rent year after year, landlords charge fees for applying to wait lists, to applying to rent properties, and everything in between. They want to make money, not just off of people who they're having signed leases, but everyone who's even looking for housing in the area, right? Something that we all need in the basic human rights. Even when these fees are ostensibly refundable, they're extremely difficult and nigh impossible to actually get refunded. I urge City Council to eliminate non-refundable fees and heavily restrict even refundable fees in order to remove the burden from tenants who can't bear this cost as much as a landlord who might lose out on $50. This is a necessary step in addressing the larger issue at hand of landlord greed and overreach. The results of recent reforms like the early leasing ordinance and right to renew show that landlords themselves, whether they're huge corporate monstrosities like McKinley or even so-called mom and pop landlords, can't be trusted to obey these things on their own. They can't be trusted to follow new reforms that get passed, and can't be trusted to follow standards, regulations, and guidelines that already exist. We need to fully fund the department's offices and relevant mechanisms to enforce everything that we have on the board already, and go further in strengthening that infrastructure and building up the capacity to fully hold landlords to account and make sure that we have housing that we can live in, that we can not just live in and keep the rain off of us, but live dignified lives where we don't have to deal with mold, respiratory issues, where we don't have to deal with structural issues that put us in harm's way, where we can live like human beings. I highly urge City Council to take tenants' rights seriously. In my day job, I'm a union organizer, and we all know, as many of you do on City Council, that workers are on the back foot. But when I started doing this housing stuff, when I started having housing issues of my own, I found that tenants, the rights for tenants, and the fight that we have makes the fight that we're waging on the worker organizing side seem like a cakewalk. It's absolutely brutal, and we have little to no recourse on a wide range of issues. We're all workers, whether we're in the workplace or out of the workplace. And I know many of you on City Council make a big deal out of your pro-worker credentials. I highly urge you to take this seriously and realize that you cannot be pro-worker while also neglecting the rights and taking these things like they're not serious. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mira.
The caller Mira is on Zoom. Please raise your hand. Mayor Pro Tem, I don't have any other information about where this caller was coming from.
Thank you. We'll move along to the next person. Next up, we have Serge Vandervoo.
Thank you for having me. I rent office space for about 5 years now on the corner of Catherine and Fifth Ave. It's 220 North Fifth Ave. And I've noticed, so I was there before the bike lane was built there. and I've noticed a difference since it's been built. I think it's great that it's there. But if you're heading west on Catherine and making a left-hand turn, heading south on Fifth Ave, I've noticed some real close calls with a couple of people riding down because you're kind of coming down a hill on Catherine. And then the first day of Art Fair, I actually hit a cyclist because I have a parking spot there off Catherine. And I was looking forward, I had my turn indicator on, and when I made that turn, it happened so fast. And luckily, he was okay. His bike got completely swallowed by my van. So we walked down here and filed a police report and did everything right. And we were both in total agreement that how dangerous it was in terms of not being able to, he wasn't even able to see that I had my turn signal on and just headed straight through, and we connected. So that intersection, I actually made a graphic board, I couldn't help myself, but it basically, that intersection has a smooth green paint job all the way through. So there's no indication right here of that somebody could be turning, you know, and that's why I'm here, to ask for that, so that, you know, both the cyclists and the drivers, I would say, that they have some kind of warning of that possibility. That's right where I hit the biker right there. It could have been pretty serious. It was really scary. So thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Next up, we have Faith Redwine Atieno. We had Faith in-house, but if you are on Zoom, can you raise your hand?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Good evening. My name is Faith Redwine Otieno, and I'm a social worker. I have worked for Washtenaw County Community Mental Health as a support coordinator before my present position as a care coordinator for Michigan Primary Care Association, where I work with 40 federally qualified health centers, including Packard Health. I'm also a member of the Washtenaw County Social Services Board and the Fund Review Board, to name a few. Since moving to Ann Arbor in 2016, I have lived in 7 different apartment complexes, including my present home at Park Place, owned by McKinsey Property, and one privately owned condo at Summitview Condominiums. The reason for moving often has to do with the cost of housing in Ann Arbor. I have learned that housing doesn't accommodate middle-class single-parent households or lower-income individuals. Housing in Ann Arbor is geared mainly towards higher-income families and college students. In addition to this, private landlords or property management companies are not the best landlords. I have lived in private property as some of you only to have a landlord who was more interested in receiving regular monthly income instead of providing safe housing. Upon moving out, my DTE bill has increased significantly due to faulty window treatment. My current place of residence is worse because my mailbox has been broken since moving in, and the washer and dryer downstairs need quarters and debit cards. I had signed a lease to pay $1,399 in rent in April 2023, only to receive a monthly billing statement showing regular rental increases. I paid $1,427.95 for May, $1,492.30 for June, and $1,497.04 for July. I believe cooperative housing is a great idea, and I did suggest this during the funding review team meeting. Cooperatives are affordable and are created to accommodate multiple income levels in addition to having tenants serving on the board to address community concerns. When concerns are raised with property management or private landlords, the issues are not addressed immediately. In addition to this, some income-based units that are available at some apartment complexes are still relatively high in cost. Plus, to add salt to the wound, some subsidized housing complexes are horrible due to negative connotations associated with the word subsidized in poor individuals. We must remember that safe, affordable, livable, and equitable housing is a human right. In fact, one of the social determinants of health includes safe housing. When individuals are unable to afford or do not receive safe housing, it can affect their mental health, well-being, and quality of life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, we have reached 15 people. I believe we have a little bit of time left. So we're going to have one more caller. We have Jessica Przinski next.
Hello, my name is Jessica Przinski, and I've been an Ann Arbor resident since I came to college here when I was 18, except for 7 years when I lived and taught in Detroit. I've been a renter, I've been a homeowner, and then I'm back to renting again, thanks to divorce. I live in Traver Crossing at Barton Drive and Plymouth Road. It's owned by McKinley. The reason I'm there is strictly because of the location. The location is great, everything else is terrible. It's right across the street from my daughter's school. She's able to walk to her dad's house and to her friend's house, so that's super important. Our 2-bedroom is $1,623. With fees and utilities, it's over $1,700 a month, and our rent went up 8% this year. I feel stuck. I don't want to move out of Ann Arbor. I don't think I should have to move out of Ann Arbor. If you're a renter, there's really no cheaper place than McKinley. It's not a healthy place to live. We have black mold. And the main problem is the plumbing is from like the 60s. It all needs to be replaced, but that's not, McKinley's never going to do that because it's way too expensive. So the plumbing continuously leaks and we continually have mold and bad air quality. I've had purse mice 3 times. This is when you reach into your purse for something and a mouse leaps out of your purse and onto you. It's become almost like a regular, anyways, yeah, there's a bad rodent problem. I'm generally pretty laid back, and I wouldn't be so angry if there wasn't such a disconnect between the quality of like our living situation and the rent. It's so incredibly mismatched. There's a new wave of tenant organizing in Ann Arbor, in Ypsi, and statewide. Because the affordable housing crisis is making people desperate, and it's totally unsustainable, and there is no place to go. Requiring developers to include a handful of affordable units to approve their building, it's completely insufficient. We need people on our side at the state level and the city level who are willing to flat out side with tenants against the big landlords. This is not like a win-win situation. We need aggressive, broad policies like limiting rent increases. We need public housing that's not for profit and that's mixed income, because then you can get over, some of the, the negative, stereotypes of public housing. The landlords are going to fight any effective policy, and we need you to stand with us. That's why we mobilized to the city council meeting tonight. We're going to be mobilizing to Lansing to demand statewide policies, and we would like your support. So thank you for having us. And the last thing I'd like to do is I'm going to give you the petition that we had community members sign in support of us. All right, thank you.
Thank you, and you can bring that to the clerk. Thanks. Having reached the conclusion of our 45-minute public comment reserved time, any remaining speakers, we will reopen public comment at the end of the meeting for public comment overflow. We now come to communications from council. Are there any communications from council this evening? Councilmember Dish.
Thank you. I just want to reassure the person who spoke about the Holocaust that the question of how to write about the experience of the Nazi death camps, whose horrors defy the human imagination, has inspired countless writers, scholars, Nobel laureates, philosophers like Hannah Arendt, and survivors like Elie Wiesel. It is surely not beyond the capacity of Ann Arbor school students to broach questions such as these, though it may be beyond yours. I'd also like to address the new compost policy. We've heard a little bit about, to move to this subject from the previous. Beginning September 4th, you'll only be able to put out 10 paper bags for compost pickup, in addition to filling up your, compost container. We've heard concerns about this, and I want to emphasize that this is not a service cut. It is probably a change in your workflow. Lots of us cram our fall and spring cleanups into a single season, and we end up with 30 bags out at our curb. Now, over the course of the season, you will still be able to put out all the bags that you fill. I don't think even at 10 bags a week, you're going to exceed the limit. If you put, even if you did 10 every week,
from September to whenever it is, December. You wouldn't run out. You just can't put them out all at once. And I want to just explain that the main motivation for this change is safety for the city employees who collect our compost. They have to load each bag by hand onto a truck, and those trucks are not low to the ground. This council has been an advocate for worker health and safety when evaluating contractor contracts, and this workflow management aims to protect our in-house workers. So this is not a change that we vote on, but it is a change that I personally support. And if you're worried about how to adapt to it, talk to your neighbors. We don't all clean our yards up in the same week. And so, and I'll just let anybody know that if I'll do it once. That's all I ever do. I'm very lazy. You are welcome to drop 10 of your bags off in my front yard anytime my bags aren't out there. And I bet you can reach similar agreements with your own neighbors.
Thank you. Councilmember Song.
I don't know if I can make the same offer. I'm sorry to see that Mr. Kaku has left. I was really delighted and surprised to hear from him. So I wrote a little note. Hopefully he's still watching and will return and watch online. I actually know the Kakus from when I did my MSW field placement at International Families Outreach Project on North Campus Housing back in 2003. So that's 20 years ago. And at the time, the housing struggles were, for international students, quite complicated since spouses aren't, because of their visa status, were not allowed to work here in the States. So the housing crisis continues 2 decades later. I really appreciated the comment because I think we forget that we assume the housing crisis impacts mostly students. Clearly, it impacts families. And for the Kakus, I think I want to remind folks that this is a family that raised 2 children in Ann Arbor Public Schools. Lydia is an active artist. You've seen her work. Oh, Mr. Kaku. I've been to Lydia's art exhibitions. Her work has been featured in Sweetwater's beloved community members that we know and see and witness struggle. And to actually voice that struggle, I really appreciate that reminder of how the impact is ongoing and the struggle is shared. So that's a lot to think about. I also wanted to invite folks to Jewish Family Services Walk a Mile in My Shoes. It's a 3rd annual event. It'll be in Burns Park this year on September 10th. I'm on Jewish Family Services board. And this is a fundraiser that's in support of the services they provide for resettling refugees, supporting older adults, families dealing with food insecurity, and needing counseling support. And I just want to, I will continue with my pledge every time a Holocaust denier comes and gives public comments here to give $1,000. I'm happy to give that donation to an organization I love and to a community that still struggles with hate here.
Thank you. Councilmember Briggs.
Wanted to thank everybody who came and most everybody who came and provided public comment tonight. I know it's hard to come and make time for this and also to get in front of a group. And so I appreciate you taking the time to do that and sharing your stories with us. I want you to know that we are also very concerned about the affordable housing crisis that we're having in our city. We are committed to improving renters' rights. I spoke with Representative Carrie Reinigans recently, sharing my support for rent control as well. So I know that those the things that you have brought forward are things that we are trying to move forward as well. So thank you for that. On other items that I wanted to mention tonight as well, for those who are interested in energy-related issues, tomorrow night at the Energy Commission meeting, there's going to be a roundtable discussion regarding our grid that's going to feature a professor from University of Michigan, as well as the representative from DTE, in response to a desire to understand more some of the reasons that we're having our power outages and the reasons our need to prevent them, and also the power surges we've been experiencing. And finally, Councilmember Cornell, who is usually here, my colleague in the 5th Ward and I will be having a listening hour on Sunday, August 20th from 4 to 5 p.m. Or later if we need to, at the Ann Arbor Arts Center on the 2nd floor. And we do that monthly, so always welcome folks from the 5th Ward to come out and chat with us in person.
Thank you. Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you. I think I spoke a couple of meetings ago about upgrades to the Almendinger Park playground. I went past the park today and noticed that the work started this week. It looks like the existing playground minus the merry-go-round is fenced off while they do the upgrades, but it's supposed to be a 4-week timeline. So I wanted to mention that, Ward 4 news. I also wanted to draw people's attention to the work of Dr. Fred Fang, who's an assistant professor at U of M Dearborn, who's been doing a bike counter project on North Division near Catherine over the last year or so. I saw him Friday night at Ann Arbor's monthly bike party. This is an all ages, all abilities slow roll through Ann Arbor. I encourage you all to attend sometime. It's really a lot of fun and very accessible. Anyway, he let me know that record numbers were coming in. He had the July numbers, and his team observed an all-time high monthly count of 10,502 bike trips. Average daily trips were 339. The peak day count was 508, which is also the all-time high. That's over 10,000 rides that were not in a car, helping us not only with our climate action goals, but also with congestion for those who are driving. And we're seeing the number of rides. This is consistent with an increase that we're seeing in bike riding as we build out buffered, separated bike lanes. Division in particular was just recently extended all the way down to Hoover. And so I think this just highlights the importance of creating a safe, complete network for people to get where they need to go. You can visit the dashboard. If you just Google bike counter in Ann Arbor, it will come up. His team uses a cable on the ground, much like you see for automobile traffic counts. And just as a warning, they haven't been collecting winter data because the cable is susceptible to snow plowing. So if you go there and you see no rides for the months, I think of like November until May, it's not because there were no riders, it's because they weren't counting during that time. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I would also like to just thank and acknowledge all of the folks who came tonight to speak about renters issues. I know that this is something as a liaison to the Renters Commission, along with Councilmember Harrison, that we're working on quite regularly. I do want to just reiterate, I think many of us have spoken with our legislative leaders about the need for state action in order to enable rent control, to allow our local government to even do anything that looks like a restriction on rent. And so it's something that I certainly support. It's something that I know many of my colleagues support. Councilmember Harrison and I are also working with staff right now on legislation to address the non-refundable fees and waitlist fees. We know that it's a problem. We have recommendations from the Renters Commission, and so we've actually met with legal staff and are beginning to work on an ordinance to hopefully address that. And so hopefully we'll have more action soon. And then I also just I know that we have a closed session this evening, or a plan for a closed session this evening. And so if anyone who is still on this list is not able to stay till the end of our meeting and you want to send us your comments, we will also, of course, read them that way and make sure that they get into the record. But I just want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard, even if you can't stay to the conclusion of the meeting. Finally, I will announce that Councilmember Ghazi Edwin and I have our next office hours, our coffee hour, on August 19th at 11 a.m. It will be at the Bryant Community Center, and so we are doing it in coordination with Derek Miller, the Executive Director of CAN, to talk about the work on sustainability in the Bryant neighborhood. But we also ask that anyone who comes out to chat with us brings a non-perishable food item to donate to the Bryant Food Pantry. So we hope to see many of you there. Are there any more comments from council? All right. At our next meeting, I am not the mayor, but on behalf of the mayor, I would like to recommend the following nominations for your consideration at our next meeting: to the Energy Commission, Mark Hans; to the Planning Commission, Julie Weatherby; and to the Zoning Board of Appeals, Sadira Clark. And also at the next meeting, we will have a resolution to appoint a non-resident elector, Vanessa Jackson, to the Human Rights Commission. We now come to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Iyer, seconded by Councilmember Ackman. Believe we have a staff introduction on this before we. I can do that. I don't know if I recorded. Okay. Do we have any discussion of the consent agenda? Councilmember Harrison.
I want to pull CA 16.
Councilmember Song.
I won't be pulling CA 12. I just want to comment, I think this is the right point, comment that speaking of struggles with vegetation, I just want to note that Davy Tree Expert Company scored a perfect 100 in their bid on qualifications, experience, accountability, and were in the lowest bid, and agreed to wage and non-discrimination requirements that the city has. So I'm really looking forward to that contract and that vote against vegetation.
Any further discussion of the consent agenda? All those in favor of the consent agenda with the exception of CA 16, please say aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved with 10 council members present? 9 council members present. With 9 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement for CA 18, CA 19, and CA 20. CA 16. A resolution to approve a contract with Ann Arbor Spark for economic development services. Moved by Councilmember Harrison, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Is there discussion? Councilmember Harrison.
Yes.
We do have.
Actually, sorry, this is where we have the.
Administrator Dahoney.
My apologies. This is where we have the staff introduction.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a request for a staff introduction. However, we didn't have sufficient time to address the questions that were presented to us. It's going to take about a week to do that, but we did want to go ahead and put the questions on the record tonight, and we'll supply the answers in writing to the council member for next week. What percentage of clients served by Spark in their previous contracts were in the city? With the city were Black, ethnic minority-owned businesses? How many of the businesses Spark worked with under their city contracts were disability-owned? What was the number or percentage of women-owned businesses that Spark supported during their previous contracts with the city? How many veteran-owned businesses were among the clients served by Spark in their previous contracts with the city? What was the number or percentage of LGBTQ plus owned businesses that Spark supported during their previous contracts with the city? Could you elaborate on the methods or strategies Sparks used to outreach to communities of Black, ethnic minority-owned businesses, disability-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, and LGBTQ plus owned businesses? What amount of funding was secured by Spark for businesses owned by Black, ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, women, veterans, and LGBTQ plus community? How has Spark's approach to supporting diverse business owners, including the LGBTQ plus community, evolved since the Washtenaw Development Council and Ann Arbor Spark consolidation in 2006? How many Spark incubated and assisted businesses hired graduates from the Michigan's public universities and colleges? How many of these graduates became employed through Spark's job board? What is the racial and ethnic composition of Spark's staff and board? How many members are from Black or ethnic minority backgrounds? How many members of Spark's staff and board are individuals with disabilities? What is the gender balance within Spark's staff and board? How many are women? How many members of Spark's staff and board are veterans? What is the representation of LGBTQ plus individuals within Spark's staff and board? What strategies or initiatives has Spark implemented to promote diversity within its staff and board? Can you provide information, excuse me, about any training or development programs that Spark has implemented to ensure its staff and board are knowledgeable about working the diverse businesses and communities, including Black, ethnic, minority-owned, disability-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, and LGBTQ plus owned businesses? And the final question, has Spark taken any measures to ensure its leadership, including the board of directors, reflects the diversity of the communities it serves? So those are the questions for the record. Staff needs time to respond, and we'll do that in a week.
Councilmember Harrison.
I just wanted to thank Administrator Dohoney. I recognize I did send those over. I thought it was a lot, but I sent those over this morning, and I worked on it over the weekend. So thank you for working on getting the answers to those. I'll be interested to hear. Thank you.
Given the fact that we will not have answers to these for about a week, is there interest in postponing this item to our next agenda?
No. We can proceed.
Right.
I mean,
Any further
Just
comment or discussion?
I'll move to postpone it.
Would you?
Moved by Councilmember Song to postpone. Is there a second? Councilmember Iyer. Any discussion of the postponement? To the next meeting?
Yes, to the, oh, no, I won't be here. I'll still move to postpone it. I feel like Councilmember Harrison's questions are worthwhile, and I'm sure she's not alone in wondering and having that information available to us at the table and to community members. Thank you for bringing them up. I'm sorry I won't be here to hear the answers, but I am very, very curious to see what the results are.
Any further discussion on the postponement? All those in favor of postponing CA16 to our next meeting, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The postponement passes. We now come to a public hearing. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to City Council about specific subject matter of the public hearing. To speak at a public hearing, you must not have signed up in advance, but your comments must relate to the topic of the hearing on the agenda. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk will alert speakers when 30 seconds are remaining, and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Our public hearing this evening is public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend section 1207 of chapter 8 of the City Code. Is anyone here tonight who would like to speak at this public hearing? We will give it a second if anybody is calling in.
If there are callers on Zoom who want to speak, please press star 9. Mayor Pro Tem, I don't have any callers online.
Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. We now come to approval of the council meeting minutes. You have before you the regular session minutes of July 17th, 2023, moved by Councilmember Watson, seconded by Councilmember Dish. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It passes. We now come to B1, an ordinance to amend section 1207 of chapter 8 of the City Code. Moved by Councilmember Briggs, seconded by Councilmember Ackman. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Briggs.
Just as a reminder, this is a small tweak to the Transportation Commission bylaws that would remove the requirement for one member of the Transportation Commission be an owner of a transportation business operating in Ann Arbor. This was because it was difficult to fill that position, so I'm trying to provide more opportunity on that commission for folks who are interested. Please apply. This was made last fall at the recommendation of Transportation Commission when I was serving on as liaison. Councilmember Ackman is the liaison now.
Thank you. Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you. In line with the federal emphasis on seniors aging in place, our commitment to inclusivity demands that every voice in our community is given a platform. I've discerned a gap in the ordinance which establishes the Transportation Commission. While it maintains the participation of 7 public members, there is a potential oversight. There's no designated seat for someone 55 years or older. Given that the ride provides passes for those age 60 and above, and in light of AAATA's cutback on same-day paratransit services, efficiently hindering them from social engagements, unexpected medical visits, and contributing to car emission reductions, it's paramount to acknowledge that, akin to individuals with disabilities, seniors possess distinct transportation demands. These include adaptive and easily accessible active mobility services, especially as the city moves forward toward more active mobility initiatives. Additionally, the City of Ann Arbor's proactive engagement in drawing seniors to settle here accentuates this oversight. Their contribution can offer invaluable insights, paving the way for a public transit system that is more user-friendly for all age brackets. Ensuring their representation can help us gain a deeper understanding of their needs and lead to improvements in our transportation framework. I propose that we revise the bylaws to reserve at least 1 seat for a community member who is 55 years or older. This step will ensure the incorporation of the unique perspective and requirements of our senior community in our transportation policies and services. This is where I move to, okay, so with these considerations, I move to postpone the discussion to September 18th. This interlude will grant the Transportation Commission adequate time for deliberation and feedback.
Seconded by Councilmember Ackman. Is there discussion of the postponement? Councilmember Ackman.
Just to chime in, the Transportation Commission is meeting next Wednesday, the 16th, and so I think that should give us ample time. Thank you.
Councilmember Briggs.
I appreciate Councilmember Harrison's recommendation on this. I think the points that you brought up were solid about why we might want to consider that. One piece that I might ask the Transportation Commission to consider as we're doing that is I know that we have been often overrepresented by older voices in terms of the public comment we've received and sometimes on commissions. And so something just to consider in terms of having designated seats. I can understand how that might be beneficial in this specific case, but something to be thinking about for the commission.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Harrison.
I might add that I would love to see this be a person of color who's over 55. I mean, that's just kind of, I just need to say it. So, I mean, I don't know. Perhaps you guys, at your meeting, you can just kind of discuss that as well. I guess that's just me weighing in. I would love to see a person of color who's over 55. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Councilmember Song.
It's not just her. That's it.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
Yeah, I just want to agree and say also I appreciate Councilmember Harrison, you pointing out that 55 plus years is distinctly different from someone who has a disability, regardless of where they are in their age. So their specific needs. So I think it's a worthwhile consideration. Thank you.
I think what we are also hearing is a call for citizens to apply to serve on your boards and commissions. We are often looking for new members to join. So Please remember that that is an opportunity to serve your community. Any further discussion? All those in favor of postponing to September 18th, say aye. All those opposed? The motion is approved. C1, an ordinance to amend the zoning map, being a part of section 5.10.2 of chapter 55 of title 5 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Is there discussion? Councilmember Dish.
Thank you. So we are asked to rezone 10 lots that total 1.66 acres, which are located south of East Stadium Boulevard between South State Street and South Industrial Boulevard in the central part of the city, proximate to campus. We're asked to make the rezoning from the current zoning designation of R4C to C1AR with conditions. This will allow considerably greater density on these parcels, which are currently multifamily residential. And it will allow construction of 2 multi-story towers for a mixed-use building totaling 220 square feet that will provide approximately 215 apartments and include ground floor retail, office, and childcare space. I would like to make it clear that the city's approval of Southtown would not obligate us to approve future applications for C1AR zoning in that area, and it would not open the door for a flood of STRs in that area. Zoning is considered on a site-by-site basis. If all things were equal on a future zoning petition, if our approval of this decision would make a compelling argument for approval in a future case, but it would not force our hand. Even in similar geographies, the attributes of a rezoning are rarely identical from petition to petition. So, when this petition came before Planning Commission, we heard strong support, and we heard some strong support earlier tonight, because there is considerable excitement for the proposed project. It is an innovative, all-electric project with rooftop solar to reduce its carbon footprint and geothermal heating and cooling. If all goes well, it will be the first tall mass timber construction in the state of Michigan. There are some state guidelines that I think still need to be worked through around that. This is a building structure that continuously stores carbon and will store approximately 1,740 metric tons of carbon, which, if you were wondering, is equivalent to over 4 million miles driven by gas-powered cars. So that's a lot. This project does not come to us as a PUD because that would not be correct. There is an appropriate zoning category for it in our code, and that is C1AR. The developer offered 4 conditions. The maximum height for these buildings will be 100 feet. C1AR has no height limit, so that's a significant restriction that is being offered. The maximum number of vehicle parking spaces for residential use on the property will be 0.25 per dwelling unit, which is low, and we like that. Or we have expressed a liking for that. The principal use of the property shall be multiple family residential, and no more than 30% of the dwelling units may be short-term rentals. Finally, the property shall have no natural gas connections except for emergency backup power. All but the third of these, the one about 30%, only for commercial use, or rather short-term rentals, all but that one were part of the site plan that the developers brought to the Planning Commission, so they were willing to offer these conditions, and the conditions will be binding on any project that's built on this site.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Iyer.
I won't go through the litany of exciting aspects of this project. Thank you, Councilmember Dish, for doing that for us. I just want to say, as a Fourth Ward council member, I'm really excited to see this go forward, and looking forward to voting for it tonight.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? It is approved. C2, an ordinance to amend sections 5.15, 5.16, and 5.17 of Chapter 55, the Unified Development Code of Title V of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Is there discussion? Councilmember Dish.
I'd be happy to let Councilmember Riggs go first if she wants to. Okay, I'm sorry. I know you guys are getting tired of me. These modifications to TC1 are a first installment on a request that Council made of Planning Commission. They permit 2 new uses with special exception permission or special exception use approval. And that is automobile, motorcycle, recreation vehicle equipment sales and rental, and automobile, truck, and construction equipment repair. Council had asked for particular attention to repair. It comes back to us including sales in recognition that auto repair is often, even typically, attached to retail. And it comes back with with retail as well as repair, in the confidence that the form-based standards of TC1 make it safe to permit limited automobile-related uses. So our setbacks, other pedestrian-friendly features, and especially the limitations on surface parking. But Planning Commission voted to make it a special exception use because it will give us an opportunity to have a good look at any site plan that comes forward for a facility such as this one. In addition, the storage and repair of automobiles, trucks, and construction equipment has to be located in an enclosed building. Now, I understand the objections that were raised, and I think it is certainly worth deliberating them, and I know that we can start that tonight and do it again. But I want to say that without making this change, existing auto-related uses on the corridors become non-conforming. And that means that they will kind of be frozen in amber. They will not be significantly updated until they simply become obsolete and pass out of service. This change gives existing auto-related uses conforming status, which opens the possibility that they can apply for updates that are better aligned with TC1 forms than their current form is. Most of the other changes are for clarity and to reduce confusion, so I'm not going to talk about those. And if you have any other questions, you should raise them.
Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. And just as a little bit of background for those who may not be familiar with what TC1 is, it was a relatively new zoning category that we've developed in the city that's transit corridor planning, which is aimed at increasing the density along our major transit corridors. This is one of the pieces that we recognize that we need vastly much more housing in the city of Ann Arbor, and it is one of the tools. We need many tools, but in increasing supply, hopefully, we can at least stabilize prices in terms of cost in our community. So that was one of the pieces of really trying to reimagine some of our commercial corridors. State and Eisenhower was the first corridor that we rezoned. Stadium Maple area is the second, and that was done last fall. When that was done, Stadium Maples in the 5th Ward, one of the things that came out in that is that that is already a very successful mixed-use commercial corridor. And one of the pieces that we heard during that, and one of the reasons that council had unanimously recommended that Planning Commission come back and make a few tweaks to the ordinance, was because we recognize that while we are looking to have a much less car-centric community in the future, we recognize the needs for that. There are times that we might want to have, we essentially still want mixed-use neighborhoods. That's a goal in our A20 plan strategy for Action 6 is to develop mixed-use neighborhoods. And so on that piece, the car rental sale, I think it makes sense that we're having as it as a special exception use. Obviously, I don't really want to see any more car dealerships there, but as we're asking folks to live car light lifestyles, having access to car rentals in close proximity to where they live in the future would be helpful for allowing them to live car light lifestyles. Secondarily, on the car repair piece of things, it is not necessarily, if we limit these from our neighborhoods, what we're asking is for basically for them to move to the townships, and that then folks are driving their cars out to the townships and not able to walk home to their homes. So there are some additional benefits there. Also, if we're trying to build more homes for folks, maybe we shouldn't ask them to drive out of the city to get to a job. So that was some of the rationale behind it. I did have one question for staff in terms of the changes that were made, and that was a question around the enclosure for car repairs. Is there a staff member that is available to answer a question?
Mr. Tahoney?
Brett Leonard is on Zoom.
Mr. Leonard will address your question.
Thanks. I'll wait till he gets on to ask it. Is he there?
Good
Sorry.
evening.
Sorry, Brett.
Good
Can't
evening.
Sorry about that. Should put down my computer screen. So the question that I have is just in terms of the changes that are being made, will that allow for car repair before or after a car is repaired? Could it be parked in an adjacent parking space, or would that car need to be kept within the facility before and after repair?
It would have to be kept in the facility. The Planning Commission and the ordinance that's in front of you specifically mentions not only the repair, but the storage of those vehicles have to be maintained in an enclosed building. That was a standard that was previously applied to our C2B commercial zoning district for similar uses. The proposed ordinance carries that forward to the TC1. That adds a little bit, it adds additional restrictions in that regard on top of the already form-based restrictions of the TC1 district.
And is all parking required to be in?
Council member, your time has expired.
Thank you. Knew it would come.
Is there further discussion? Councilmember Dish?
May I ask Mr. Leonard if all parking in TC1 is required to be enclosed? Is that your question? Yeah.
Thank you, council members Dish and Briggs. It is not. The TC1 does require surface parking, but it limits the surface parking to be no larger than 100% of the building footprint or 125% of the building footprint, depending on the lot size. Parking above that is still below the overall maximum parking of 333 square feet of use would have to be enclosed in a building or in a structure on top of that.
So just to clarify, TC1 does allow surface parking, but it is limited. It is limited to pretty much the footprint of the building, largely, right? And so there would be some possibility of, but storage and repair of automobiles would have to be in an enclosed space, even though there can be.
There can be vehicular parking for employees, for customers coming and going, but the restriction would require that the actual vehicles being repaired be in an enclosed space. I do want to make it clear that zoning is prospective, so keep in mind that's going to apply to new uses that are established under these parameters in the TC1 district.
Councilmember Ekman.
Thank you. So as someone that co-sponsored the council resolution that led to this work, I guess I want to extend my appreciation for the work that went into this, but I also feel the need to explain why I won't be supporting it at first reading tonight. I do know firsthand that car rental can serve as an important element in the car-free or car-light household, but I don't really see the need to open the gates to additional car dealerships in these zones, even by special exception use. Those that are there now can stay, they can continue to operate indefinitely, I think as we've discussed, and I just don't really see a compelling need to open the door to new structures dedicated to this purpose. To be perfectly honest, living off of Stadium, I'm reminded on an almost daily basis of such an auto-centric business and how difficult it seems to retrofit it for other uses. So that's why I won't be supporting this tonight.
Is there further discussion? Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, so I would like to propose an amendment to the draft ordinance, which is on section 2, subsection C1. I would like to strike anti-C1 and then the red S, which would essentially eliminate the inclusion of the requirement that the storage and repair of automobiles, trucks, and construction equipment must be located in an enclosed building. This would be the only situation that would require, I could just want to strike the storage component. Let me go back. I'm sorry. I need to go back and strike my proposed amendments. Sorry, need to think this out more, what I'm actually proposing. So I just want to, in section 2, subsection C, part 1, strike storage and having that pertain to TC1 districts, I guess.
Councilmember, can you also put that in writing and send it to the clerk?
Yes, that seems reasonable.
Is everyone clear where we are in the ordinance? Is there a second?
Oh. I guess point of information. So is the intent here, you're saying car they are actively repairing, but they couldn't, or is that, sorry, that's just
So the intent of this would be, I think it's quite typical if you think about going to a car repair, for car repair, when you go in, oftentimes what you find is that when you go to pick up your car, it is then parked in the parking lot waiting for you, and that's where you drop it off as well. It's very atypical for you to have to take your car and have it go inside the building the entire time. And so this would be a fairly atypical approach. I can understand, but that's what I'm proposing.
Okay.
Is there a second to the proposed amendment? Seconded by Councilmember Dish. Discussion of the amendment.
Sorry, working on it.
Councilmember Dish?
The only thing that is a little complicated is the way this condition was applied was with reference to another section in the code. So it replicates a restriction that applies in C2B. And so this has to be rewritten, but I'm assuming that staff can do that later, knowing the intent.
Perhaps we should pose that question to staff.
Please do.
Let's take that surmise as a question to staff.
Mr. Leonard, is...
Yeah, so that's one of the purposes of first reading is to make sure this ordinance gets into the appropriate configuration and language that you want to share with the community in advance of the second reading and public hearing. I think to Councilmember Dish's point, this is, it's going to have an impact on not only the TC1 district, but also the C2B district, but it is the same section that's referenced. So I certainly don't have any concerns about preparing this ordinance in advance of second reading and publication. it is in a section of the code that is reflective of additional regulations that we apply, in this case to automobile, truck, construction, and equipment repair. I don't think it would require a lot of reconfiguration of this proposed ordinance. So if the council is supportive of it, I think it's something we could accomplish before second reading.
Is there further discussion of the amendment? I guess I have a question. So if I'm reading this correctly, Mr. Leonard, if storage and were removed from section 2C1, would that then allow for a new truck, car, construction equipment repair business to open and create? They would still have to follow the stipulations around parking maximums outdoors, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, correct? Any opposed? The amendment passes. Back to a discussion of the main motion. Their discussion. Then we will do a roll call vote, starting with Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
Yes. Oh, sorry, what? Oh, sorry.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin?
Now, yes.
Mayor Taylor, absent. Councilmember Iyer?
No.
Councilmember Ackman?
No.
Councilmember Briggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Cornell, absent. Councilmember Dish?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrison?
Yes.
Councilmember Song?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
Yes.
Councilmember Redina?
Yes.
Motion carries.
C3, an ordinance to amend Chapter 106, Home Energy Rating Disclosure, to Title 8, Building Regulations of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Harrison. Is there discussion of the motion? Councilmember Briggs. Oh, and I believe actually there's a staff introduction on this as well. Sorry. Councilmember Briggs, please hold.
I believe Mr. Smith is on the line to do the introduction.
Am I on?
You are.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. Good evening. My name is Zach Waz-Smith. I'm a manager in the Office of Sustainability and Innovations. I'm pleased to present to you the HERD ordinance tonight, or to represent it. Briefly, the HERD ordinance would, in short, require that homes in Ann Arbor acquire a home energy score prior to being listed for sale. The goals of this requirement are to enhance consumer protections by providing information about the full costs of operating a home prior to purchase, and to provide a clear pathway to safer, healthier, more comfortable, and more efficient homes. In addition to some of the responses that we've already provided to your questions, I will respond to some council questions directly asked as a part of this staff introduction. So question 1, how might this ordinance negatively impact homeowners who are lower income or don't have discretionary income? What mitigation measures are in place to ensure that further displacement of Black and other ethnic minorities within the city do not occur as a result of this ordinance? A few things to note in response to this. First, as I mentioned, one of the primary goals of the HERD ordinance is to help protect home buyers from unexpected energy costs associated with inefficient homes. Families who face energy burden spend more than 6% of their income on energy. And in Michigan, low-income residents spend on average 15% of their income on energy bills. These households are disproportionately low-income families with children, Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and seniors. So by requiring home sellers to disclose the energy efficiency of their homes, it can protect home buyers from purchasing a home that they would otherwise be beyond their means to heat and cool. Secondly, the HERD ordinance does not require a certain score to be achieved. Ordinance is not a performance standard, but instead it requires that a score be obtained. Even so, information gathered from the home energy score can be used to apply for city programs to help make strategic home improvements. Third, the program will offer free home energy scores via a full-time OSI staff member and the hiring of additional capacity in the private sector as needed. This means there are no required financial costs to the home seller for getting the home energy score. And lastly, the HERD ordinance as presented tonight contains section 8606, which is a waiver program which could be used if an unexpected burden or event occurred, which prevented somebody from getting their home energy score. Question 2. When the feasibility study for this ordinance was performed, was there an investigation into the experiences of BIPOC, lower income, disabled, and older homeowners and renters in the cities where similar ordinances are already in place? If such an investigation was conducted, how did the ordinance impact the buying, selling, and renting experiences of these homeowners and renters? Did the implementation of similar ordinances in other cities impact the availability of affordable housing stock? Can documentation be provided to support the answers to these questions? The U.S. Department of Energy report that analyzed communities where homeowners were required to secure home energy score assessments before selling their homes found that final home prices were 0.5% higher for every 1 point increase in the DOE's 10-point home energy score scale. Similarly, they found that final home sale prices were 0.4% higher for every $100 of decrease in the home energy score's estimated utility bills. The OSI staff did not find any reports that specifically investigated the impacts of the home energy scores on BIPOC, lower income, disabled, or older adults. We did, however, meet with multiple peers in other communities to discuss how they created safety valves in their program to ensure they weren't placing an unintentional burden on especially low income and BIPOC households. And this is how we landed on, first, the waiver program in the ordinance. Second, hiring a full-time staff member to offer the assessments for free. And third, aligning our energy rebate programs to be offered through the community climate action millage with the various categories of improvement identified in the home energy score reports. So question 3, how does this help Ann Arbor homeowners, landlords, and developers participate in the Attainable Housing Facilities Act, the Residential Housing Facilities Act, and/or the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone Act? OSI staff were not involved in these programs, and given the last-minute nature of this question, we were not able to coordinate with other departments to get a response. If council desires, we can follow up with colleagues in the community services and others as needed to get a response. For now, though, these are not programs that the OSI administers, and therefore we're unable to provide detail about the city's involvement. Question 4, how exactly is this different from DTE's energy audit program? Can a chart that includes what's included in each audit and the certification process to become an auditor be provided? Are there any Ann Arbor or Washtenaw County-based auditors or program partner organizations that train the auditors for this program? The DOE develops the home energy score, and the home energy score requires very specific data points to be gathered during an assessment. The score is based on things like the home's envelope, which is in basic terms, the separation between the inside and the outside. It's like the foundation, the roof, the walls, the windows. It also includes HVAC systems and water heating. Basically, the higher the score, the more efficient the home. But beyond the score, the Home Energy Score report includes specific recommendations on how to improve the score with projects that have an expected payback of 10 years or less. The energy consultations offered by DTE are quite basic in comparison to the Home Energy Score. While the DTE consultation may provide some simple energy efficiency products, it lacks the depth of information that can provide a homeowner insights on any major changes to the home. And yes, there are existing auditors trained to conduct home energy score assessments in our community beyond the one being hired by the OSI. And the OSI is planning to offer free training for other energy assessors that are interested in becoming certified assessors. Question 5. Why is this program, instead of helping owners become zero energy homes, why this program, instead of helping owners become zero energy homes through grants and no interest or low interest loans based on income? There's also the Home Improvement Expert Program and Clean Energy to Communities Program. In addition to the HERD ordinance, we are developing programs that will help residents make improvements in their homes and businesses. These include rebate programs that are currently being designed in the OSI. However, a homeowner or a business needs to know what improvements are needed in order to make a strategic decision about their next upgrade. Having the Home Energy Score provides that information and can simultaneously help OSI ensure that we are directing the limited taxpayer dollars that we have to the highest impact investments. So to put it another way, the OSI is strongly considering having residents get a home energy assessment before they can apply for rebates. In this way, we'll be able to ensure that residents are getting matched with the right incentive to make the biggest impact on their bills, their health, their safety, and the climate. We're also working on a home energy advisor service to help people make more strategic decisions and to connect folks with additional rebates and incentives to make improvements. And those recommendations will be based on a home or a business's assessment. And finally, we wanted to note that Ann Arbor did win a Clean Energy to Communities Program Award, which is a technical assistance grant that we are currently working on in collaboration with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Question 6. Though the DOE is sunsetting their Energy Star program due to the BIL and IRA provisions, the EPA lists 6 upgrade categories that could be incentivized that would cover most of the previous question. Why place an extra financial burden on homeowners after passing the 20-year, $6.8 million a year millage, which is $120 million in total, that they are already paying? Why not use an incentive-based energy assessment that provides property tax credits for homeowners who voluntarily perform a certified assessment and ongoing credits for those who make improvements? This is a good question. As to the requirement versus an incentive discussion, the OSI is taking the yes and approach. We're doing both. We are offering incentives, and we are seeking a requirement, and that is because, according to research published by Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and incentive-based programs have little to no effect on the desired outcomes of HERD here locally. LBNL examined over 26,000 home sales that occurred after receiving a home energy score. And among the many findings was that only in the cities where the home energy assessment was required to be disclosed at the time of listing did they experience a positive market impact. Places with voluntary home energy score activities showed no statistical market benefit. And we are using the community action millage, the climate action millage, to fund the energy assessor and the additional market capacity to offer these assessments for no cost to the homeowner. So in essence, we are using the climate action millage to support this program. Question 7, as real estate associations contract out with third party for their MLS, have you spoken with Rapatoni, the company that maintains the listings, to find out the logistics and timeframe of adding this extra category? No, the OSI did not speak with Rapatoni directly, but instead we used the National Association of Realtors guide, known as the Green MLS Implementation Guide. This guide was designed to help MLS staff implement certain fields in the MLS that are dedicated to information about a home's efficiency. This guide offers technical guidance, best practices, and a whole lot more to make the process as smooth and as easy as possible. Thanks for hanging in there. Just a couple more here. Question 8, was Laura Orta, Director of Organizational Equity, consulted about the ordinance? If so, what were their recommendations and concerns, and how was that addressed? Director Orta was not at the city when this ordinance was created. However, we have shared the ordinance with Director Orta and await their feedback. Question 9, which realtor companies were consulted during the decision-making process for implementing this program, and how were these conversations initiated and conducted? In the drafting and reviewing process of this ordinance, OSI staff met with the Ann Arbor Area Board of Realtors, Reinhardt Realtors, I'm going to Howard Hanna tomorrow, as well as a number of individual realtors, many of whom, but not all, are either an eco-broker or hold an NAR green designation, for instance. Because these individuals met with me on their own time, I won't mention which agencies they were with, because I don't want to inadvertently misrepresent their agencies, but all of these conversations were in large part initiated either by myself or other OSI staff. Some of them were at the request of agencies who heard and wanted to learn more. Some were in person, some were virtual, but the goal was always to gather information about the real estate sale process and to better understand the relationship shared between Ann Arbor real estate agents and their clients. We used these conversations and other publicly available information published by the Ann Arbor Area Board of Realtors and the National Association of Realtors, as well as others, to contextualize the information that was shared with us by other communities with similar ordinances in place to make this HERD ordinance make the most sense for Ann Arbor. These were the additional questions that came in today, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. Thanks for that introduction, too. Covered a lot of ground. So I serve as liaison to the Energy Commission, so I just wanted to say, respond to kind of a couple of things that I felt had come up during public comment. Obviously, this was this is an ordinance that has been recommended by the Energy Commission. One of the critiques that I think that we've heard both in public comment and some of our communications is that home buyers are not going to make these improvements. And obviously, we have some data about what happens in other communities, but I do think that we need to note that this is a priority for our community. We know that from our A20 plan that from the 2018 inventory, 23% of our emissions come from residential buildings. We have a carbon neutrality goal to be carbon neutral by 2030. That is an ambitious goal, and it is going to take a lot of work for us to get there. We have residents who have supported a climate action millage, demonstrating that this is a priority for them. They base that, we have our carbon neutrality plan that had the engagement of 68 public meetings, 66 partnership organizations, and in that, the goal of reducing our emissions in our residential buildings is clearly stated as a goal. We know that up to 80% of energy consumed in buildings at times is wasted. So it's going to take a lot of different strategies for us to get there. This is not the one action that's going to help solve that, but it is part of the puzzle. The reality is that when folks move into a home, if they are armed with information about with an energy assessment about how they can make improvements, they go out and want to make an improvement to their kitchen while they're beautifying it as well and bringing it up to they can also address the fact that there actually isn't insulation in that wall. I know that when I had an energy assessment on one of my homes, a place that I moved from previously, I learned that there was zero insulation on one of the walls. They just forgot, apparently. So, it's really important information for people to have walking into a home, and we are going to be there every step of the way to help make it easier for them to make those improvements. So I hope folks will support this tonight.
Councilmember Harrison. Councilmember Harrison. Oh, all right. Councilmember Watson.
I have a couple questions, I believe, for Dr. Stoltz. One of the questions I've gotten from constituents was about the fact that this is the seller's responsibility as opposed to the buyer's responsibility, and also somebody raised the possibility of a potential disagreement between, the buyer. The buyer chooses the essentially, I guess, the energy auditor, and then potentially the seller would do that, and potentially then the buyer could, at post-closing, have another assessment done. The assessments could disagree, and it's just generally on the inspection side, we tend to take the buyer's, it is the buyer's responsibility to do all kinds of extra inspections. So, do we have a method for kind of quality assurance on these scorings? I know in Portland, cities have sampled about 5% of the ratings. Do we have a similar plan here to make sure that everybody's kind of in agreement on what the assessments are? I guess, what the accuracy of these HERD or HES scores.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Watson. So the home energy score is it's a regulated score by the U.S. Department of Energy. So what that means is we actually have standardization in both the training of assessors and in the information that's collected in these reports. And so that's different than going out and having someone do kind of this broad energy assessment. There's actually requirements for what has to be included and adherence to that home energy score. That gives us more rigor in the information that's coming back. We also anticipate doing spot checks of the scores for sure to see what's coming into the marketplace. And I'd add one other thing that you didn't ask about, but I think it's important to note. While today we're talking about the requirement for these scores to happen at time of listing, we are actually working to have the entire marketplace get one of these assessments, because the ideal is when someone calls their realtor to say, hey, I want to list my house, the realtor's first question is, have you gotten your home energy score yet? Go do that. And if they say, yeah, I got it a year ago, that's still good. Check, you've hit that marker. So I just want to name that while we're talking about it in a pretty narrow vantage, from OSI's perspective, this is a much bigger move and encouragement in the marketplace we're trying to push forward.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Song.
Dr. Stoltz, can you speak to how this program, so I'm looking at a federal announcement on July 27th on the Biden-Harris administration opening applications for states to implement $8.5 billion for home energy rebates. Is this a consideration in anticipation of qualifying for these rebates? And I think I'm in particular noting that there's a funding for home weatherization for low-income homeowners for upgrades. So can you speak a little bit to how you plan to reconcile what you're doing locally with what could be anticipated federally?
Yeah, so generally speaking, thank you for the question, Councilmember Song. This is funding that would come back to residents to make improvements in their home. This was promised in the Inflation Reduction Act. What you noted is that DOE has opened up guidance for how the states can apply for that funding, because they haven't yet. So in a dream world, what would happen is the local rebates that we're going to be administering through the Community Climate Action Millage would be stacked with the state's rebates to go further to help people make improvements in their homes and in their businesses. We are a little ahead of the state and the timeline for that. So we are working really, really closely. We're helping the state put in their application, but chances are very high. This is slightly parallel to the conversation, but chances are very high that we will be rolling out our rebate program first locally until the state is ready, and then we will sort of stack on. But fundamentally, I think the important takeaway is the objective here in HERD is to let the marketplace, it's consumer protection, and it's then to let people coming into the community understand what strategic opportunities they have. And then we want to give them information to implement change. That includes incentives, that includes OSI's programs, and the rebates you just identified. So that's how things sort of tie together, if that made any sense.
It does. Thank you.
Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you. So I think this is good legislation. It's kind of surprising that we do this for cars and we don't do it for homes, considering the amount of energy consumption. And it makes sense just from a buyer's perspective, I think, to present this information in a standardized way. I do have questions about how, and I was also relieved to see that I think if this passes, it won't start until January of 2024. So this isn't like in 30 days or anything. But I still have questions about how we ensure that the rollout is a success. I understand the need to make it mandatory, but I guess I'm just wondering, it's one thing 2 years from now when people are familiar with this program. We've had the assessor at the city. We kind of have a marketplace that's ready. People are used to this process. And I guess I'm just wondering how we make sure we get the word out and how we also make sure that we have the resources locally to conduct these so it doesn't snag people up.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith to pick up. First is the hiring of the assessor. That job position is open right now. So if any candidates happen to be listening and are excited about this, please apply for that opportunity. That person hopefully will be starting in September. And so we'll have time for them to also ramp up, do the market outreach. And then secondarily, I think this was in a council response, we are having conversations with the private marketplace to make sure that we're building the capacity, because what we know is home sales don't happen equally every single day, that there will be times and seasons where there is increased demand, and we want to make sure that we have the external capacity for that. Mr. Smith, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. In addition to that, we are preparing to do outreach to both realtors and homeowners. Missy mentioned our goal to get all homes in Ann Arbor scored with a home energy score. And by doing that, we get the home energy scores done prior to the sale process, and it removes it from the real estate process altogether. And so we'll be doing outreach to homeowners. We're also hoping to work with the appropriate parties to get CEU credits available for realtors so that we can work together with them to also make sure that real estate agents are up to speed on this, and they're also ahead of the curve. And so we do have engagement plans, if this is to pass, that are ready to go, and so that we can hit the ground running and get the community informed.
Is there further discussion? Councilmember Song.
One of my major worries was our capacity to do this work, and if one person can really sustain a new program, and if we're introducing bureaucracy into a process that's already pretty not fun from the buyer or seller's viewpoint. But in staff responses, I see that you've pointed to the plan to engage additional private sector assessors. Is that correct? Can you explain how and when and how quickly you plan to do that, and what is the private sector like here locally? Would they have the capacity with the seasons of homes coming on market mostly in the spring?
Yeah, and I'll let Mr. Smith tie into this because I know we had some council questions on this too. That we've already been in discussions with firms that do energy assessments. They already have capacity, and they're actually going to be hiring to make sure we have additional capacity. If this passes, we anticipate coming to council with a contract, an on-demand service contract for a few different assessors that we can use as needed. So that way our staff person takes kind of first pass, and when they can't turn around things in a timely way, and we're hoping that's no more than a 5-day wait, we pull in the private sector to be able to meet demand. And we do have local assessors. And I do want to also point out that just who we have today that's great, and we have enough capacity today, but we also want to offer free training for our assessor community that doesn't yet have this training, to make sure we're continuing to scale up the workforce, because we think we're going to be moving in this direction, not just in Ann Arbor, but across the region.
Thank you.
Councilmember Watson.
So I wanted to just broadly say that I'm going to be supporting this tonight because what got me all the way there, I think, was talking about this as the miles per gallon rating for a house. And this all, as Dr. Stoltz alluded to, comes from the Department of Energy. And I think it would be easy for us to say some things along the same lines of, people don't choose their cars simply on miles per gallon, but you can imagine what it would be like if we didn't have that rating at all, if we didn't know what the possibilities were for improving efficiency, and the fact that this goes above and beyond and kind of giving people a roadmap to get to a more efficient home. The other thing that I would hope, looking at that 30-month report from Portland when they put in their ordinance, I think they put theirs in 2018, and I've been reviewing the 30-month report, but they talk about trying to make sure that this doesn't concentrate, violations of the ordinance doesn't concentrate in certain zip codes, doesn't concentrate in certain areas that exhibit certain demographics, larger minority areas, larger low-income areas. And I would encourage us to do the same thing to make sure that we're not unduly burdening those communities, but it will just have to be a consistent monitoring. I mean, we're not going to know right away. I can say the other thing in Portland, they know that people took them up on the waivers. 80 waivers were given out, I think, in the first year of the program. So I think the news from other cities is good. And I think that with some vigilance, I think we can get this to a place that will serve the residents of Ann Arbor well, and that will also respond if we're seeing, those wait times go above the 3 to 5 days that are promised in our documents here. If we see those go up, or if we see it's having a bigger impact, the violations are kind of clustered in only certain areas, or clustered in or changing the prices of people's homes in a skewed way, I think we can revisit this. But I'm comfortable supporting it tonight.
Any further discussion? I have a couple of questions, and maybe a continuation of a question, because I know that we've kind of touched on this a little bit around really just the capacity and the ability to scale. If the goal is to get every household in Ann Arbor assessed and to get the score out there, and acknowledging that this is just one of the tools in our toolbox towards our 2030 goals. But knowing that I think last year about 1,200 to 1,300 homes in Ann Arbor sold, and knowing that a number of those will come back up again between now and 2030, and some homes in Ann Arbor will never be listed between now and 2030. What is OSI's plan in order to make sure that not only are we moving forward to make sure that home buyers have this information during the purchasing process, but also that we're continuing to move across the city and get others to voluntarily participate in the program if we know that voluntary participation hasn't been super successful in other areas? And if we are wildly successful, what is our ability to scale up with a single assessor? It sounds like we have some potential local private partnerships, but would we have the ability to continue to expand that as well?
Yeah, it's an astute question. So there's kind of a few different prongs to that, and I'll go quick. One is the home energy advisor service that we're piloting right now in 14 homes. That's also offering this assessment. And so that's another kind of track. The intent there is a lesson learned from Denver, who has a similar climate tax. It happens to be a sales tax, is that when they offered rebates, they found that people went for the biggest rebate they could possibly get, whether or not that's what they needed. So an example would be heat pumps. People were applying for heat pumps when actually what they needed was air sealing. And so this allows us to be really surgical in making sure we're getting people the right improvement to improve health, safety, greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. So the home energy advisor is another track that's going to be working in the marketplace. The second kind of piece, and this is not holistic, but a piece of it, is our AmeriCorps members, which will be coming to council for approval. That grant, which we did win, should be at your next meeting. That the idea there is that's a ground game. That's 10 people who can go door to door and talk to folks about these assessments and start building the movement towards getting these assessments early and intentionally in the process. So those are just two kind of pieces of the equation.
And,
thank you.
Mayor, if I may, add to Dr. Stoltz's comments there that the home energy score is valid for 8 years after it's issued. So that gives very real plausibility to the OSI getting scores for all homes in Ann Arbor and being able to stay ahead of the home sale process once we get them all scored.
Thank you. I will also just say I'm going to support this tonight at first reading. I know that we've had a lot of conversations in the community about this, and I also want to just thank members of OSI for the conversations that they've had with stakeholders. I know that this has taken a bit longer. It was drafted quite some time ago, but that you've been very intentional about pulling people into conversations and making changes and adjustments as we've learned more. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. DC1, a resolution to appoint Julius Buzzard to the Greenbelt Advisory Commission. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Is there any discussion? I will just briefly take the opportunity to say that I am very excited about this appointment. Julius is the executive director of Growing Hope and also is involved in the Washtenaw Black Farmers Fund. We have had a number of conversations with him about the perspective that he's going to be able to bring to the Greenbelt Advisory Commission as we continue to expand and promote our Buy, Protect, Sell program, and his expertise is going to be really valuable to that body. So I am excited to begin working with him as a liaison to that, if you will all support his nomination. Thanks. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Resolution is approved. DC2, a resolution to approve the request from Carytown Concert House for a new club liquor license to be held in conjunction with a dance permit and an entertainment permit located at 415 North 4th Avenue, doing business as the Carytown Concert House. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DC3, a resolution to analyze Ann Arbor's emergency response during severe weather events and related widespread power outages. Moved by Councilmember Ackman, seconded by Councilmember Briggs. Is there discussion? Councilmember Ackman.
So once again, our community experienced a severe storm on July 26th that left many of us without power for days on end. This is at least the third time this calendar year that we've seen firsthand that DTE's electrical grid is highly susceptible to these severe storms. In this most recent storm, groceries perished, houses got hot and muggy, businesses suffered the loss of goods and customers in the days they didn't have power, and we were put on a non-essential water restriction. So I want to first start by saying thank you to staff and our first responders who responded to our community's needs in the aftermath. The Ann Arbor Public Library that served as cooling centers, places of respite, as well as a place to connect to the internet through 4 of their 5 branches, and also residents who limited their water supply. Sadly, we know this is not the last time that we're going to experience severe weather followed by widespread multi-day power outages. And I think that as a council and a city, we've taken some really important steps, including initiating a feasibility study into municipalization, seeking grant funds to pilot a sustainable energy utility. And in the spring, Councilmember Ghazi Edwin led a resolution calling for Michigan Public Services Commission and the state legislature to hold DTE accountable. But I think we also need to analyze this issue from an emergency response perspective. So keeping in mind that our 820 carbon neutrality plan identifies enhancing the resilience of our people and our place as a core strategy for responding to climate change, the aim of this resolution is to understand how our community has responded to these events this year, and then to provide a set of recommended actions that would improve our city's responsiveness, preparedness, and our resilience to such events in the future. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Councilmember Briggs.
Just wanted to thank Councilmember Ackman for leading the development of this resolution. Happy to be co-sponsoring it tonight. I think we've all heard in the aftermath of these storms certainly a frustration with our power reliability, but also questions about city response. And again, I think that, I want to make sure that I preface this by thanking our city staff, our public services, our emergency services, OSI, all of the units that really have responded to this. They're doing outstanding work, but the reality is our storms are becoming more severe and more frequent, and I think that it's been incredibly challenging this year for the city to respond. And unfortunately, we know that this is only going to increase in frequency. So I think having this type of analysis now to do a reflection on what has, what we've done, what we've worked, where the gaps are. That doesn't, a demonstration of gaps does not, I think, reflect poorly on the city. It just demonstrates on where we need to be realigning our resources moving forward so that, when we see widespread limbs down, we perhaps we're more prepared in the future to be able to respond to that in a timely fashion. Or in this last storm, we saw many traffic lights down, and I heard repeatedly from folks about the dangerous situations occurring at certain intersections for all users. And so residents are really asking us to take a look at our own operations, and I hope within the scope of this as well, we do a little bit of how other entities in the community are coming to the table or aren't coming to the table. So I know that there's a lot of response from a variety of different entities. So thank you to staff for all the work that's happening on this and for helping us understand how we can prepare better in the future.
Councilmember Song.
I appreciate this effort. Am I not missing when we're expecting this analysis to come back to? Oh, okay. So well in advance of our next budget cycle. So these are it would be interesting to see how we can plan for our next budget and budget for more timely response. I mean, I appreciate this response the city has made so far. We would have probably had worse damage if we hadn't pruned and were proactive about tree maintenance earlier in with the February storms. Was it February? Yes, it was February. It seems monthly at this point. I'm in support. I just want to acknowledge that the damage was, one block from me, we had a tree at a neighbor's house fall through their roof and damage their roof considerably. They were home. They were lucky that their children weren't in their room when the tree fell. And then another tree from their front yard landed on their car. So it was just this double whammy of trying to figure out how to fix everything, remove the branches. So I really empathize with our residents who are really trying to figure out just how to get through the next day of water not running through your house and tarping and then waiting for a city response. So I'm encouraged to see what this work will look like. Thank you.
For my part, I also just want to thank Councilmember Ackman for taking the lead on developing this and for working with us to get it on the agenda. I know that it was a relatively late edition, but I think it's an incredibly timely one. I also want to thank staff for all of the work that they put into keeping residents safe, trying to respond to the emergencies that come in after these storms. But I also just think it's really important for us to have this data in terms of being able to make necessary improvements. I think we always should be looking for data to find out where there may be more efficiencies that we can have or other focuses that we can take to make sure that we're responding. I also want to just call special attention to the final bullet point in the resolve clause because it also requests an estimate of the total emergency costs incurred by the city. And I think that's important because we know that as each of these storm events occur, that there is considerable cost to the city, but not all of that is just an emergency response because there was a storm. A lot of it is an emergency response because we have prolonged power outages at a time when we need to keep people warm, when we need to keep people cool, when we need to respond to sparking wires. And so I think it's really important to know, we know that every one of these prolonged power outages comes at a cost to our city. We know that deferred maintenance costs by DTE are exacerbating those costs. And so I think it's really important for us to have an idea of what those costs truly are. And I will also note, again, that there is a federal FEMA report that indicates that 2 major storm events, the cost incurred by those ultimately would pay for burying power lines. We are at 3 major storm events this year alone. So I will once again call on DTE to seriously start looking at burying power lines and improving their infrastructure in our community. Yes, when there are major storms and there are high winds, we know that trees can impact power lines. That doesn't happen when they are not in the trees. So I would call on DTE to continue to make investments in infrastructure improvements because it has been sorely lacking. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It passes. DB1, a resolution to approve revised bylaws of the Transportation Commission. I have a motion. Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Song. I don't know if staff is available. Is this something that should also be postponed with I believe that the change previous,
Assistant City Attorney Chris Frost did tell me ahead of time that this was contingent on the approval of B1.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to postpone this also to our September 18th meeting. Councilmember Briggs, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Is there discussion of the postponement? All those in favor? It is postponed. Closed session. City Attorney Cower, I understand that we have a closed session request tonight for the purpose of?
Yes, please, Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to request a closed session under MCL 15.268, Section 8E, regarding the pending litigation Platt Convenience, Inc. versus Ann Arbor, Michigan Court of Appeals, case number 359013.
Can I have a motion to go into closed session for the purpose stated by the city attorney? Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Roll call vote starting with Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor, absent. Councilmember Iyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackman?
Yes.
Councilmember Briggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Cornell, absent. Councilmember Dish?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrison?
Yes.
Councilmember Song?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
Yes.
Councilmember Medina?
Yes,
Motion carries.
we are in closed session. session. Motion to approve the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. Dish, Ghazi, Edwin. Is there any discussion of the clerk's report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It is approved. Do we have communications from our city attorney?
No, thank you.
Thank you. We now come to, we can now continue our public comment with our public comment overflow time with the remaining speakers on the public commentary list. Let me get back to that list. My apologies. If they are still available and wishing to address us, the next speaker would be David Miller. Not seeing them in-house and with no one on Zoom. Next up, we would have Gretchen Preston.
Ms. Preston indicated she wouldn't be able to stay.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly Fuller.
Hello, Ann Arbor City Council. This is my first time speaking ever. I come to you today because I'm facing eviction. I live in the city of Ypsilanti. I had amputated toe back in November, which led me to be hospitalized. And then in April of this year, I actually got another infection in my foot, which caused me to be hospitalized for another week. I fell behind on rent. I tried to work with Gulfside Lake Apartments. They granted a judgment, which on the 17th, I will be evicted from my home, me and my son. So I've lived in Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor area since 2005. I do not want to have to move. I do not want to be homeless. I've worked with all different facilities and everything, and basically the cost of living has gone up, but the cost of, the income limits has not. So it's showed everyone that I make too much money to get help. So basically, I've never seen since 2005, I've never seen the rent be as much as it now. It's $1,600 a month, which Section 8 does help me with a little bit of it, but I'm left, like I said, I'm just one hospitalization or car breaking down away from being homeless. So I come to you guys today just in hopes of not only Ann Arbor, but Ypsilanti help us. Our income, we're not making enough to make ends meet anymore. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bryn Curtis. Bryn Curtis. Richa Mukherjee. Rush Bant. Caleb Pfeiffer Elg.
Hello, City Council. I also come today to speak about the cost of living crisis here in Ann Arbor. Since before me and my wife even moved to Ann Arbor, it has affected us. It affected what places we were able to look at. The non-refundable application fee affected us. And I appreciate all the work that you guys have already done with the right to renew legislation and the openness you have already expressed tonight for tenants' rights. but I want to make sure that everyone here and watching later even perhaps understands that this is not sustainable. The price increases year over year are far outstripping inflation, and it's making it harder and harder to make a life here in Ann Arbor. Beyond even that, the price portion of things, there is the sheer lack of respect that landlords show their tenants. I know several people already tonight have come up to talk about things such as mold in their apartments. I can confirm that that is also true for my housing in the Traver Crossing complex. Things such as standing water, you run the dishwasher and sometimes things work out fine. You run the washing machine and you just know, oh yeah, that puddle right there, it'll go away eventually. And so it's just, we need to make sure that tenants feel not only safe in their homes, which isn't always the case, but that they feel respected and that they know that this is a place where they are welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment overflow. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilmember Iyer, seconded by Councilmember Ackman. All in favor? We are adjourned.